Hello, my name is Ken Small, and I'm an architect with SSA Architecture in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm here to talk to you today about architectural design. Now, before when YouTube was allowing thumbs up and thumbs down, I know we got a few thumbs downs on some of the other videos that are talking about how to design a restaurant, how to design an office building, because part of our audience wants to talk about how architects think about design, and so that's what this video is going to be about. I suggest you watch those other videos that are more building type specific, because they're more about a process that you would go through in trying to provide the architect with what he needed to do his design. So what kind of architects are there in the world to do architectural design for you? First of all, everyone is different, and so it's hard to make generalizations, but obviously the point of doing a short video is going to be to make some generalizations so that you can have a good understanding of what you're looking at when you're trying to hire an architect and you're looking at the issue of design. So I'll tell you, while you're watching this, we're going to move from my talking head to see some architectural design, most of which is my work, but initially we're going to start with Frank Lloyd Wright and Zaha Hadid, who you cannot hire because they're both dead. And so I don't want you to misunderstand that those initial videos are of my work. So if you're in the process of hiring an architect, and say you're doing a public building, a museum, a very large monumental project that's going to be in the public eye, subject to a lot of critique and what have you, then there's a school of thought that you want to hire a high-quality design architect according to the standards advocated by the AIA. And so what the AIA has and has had for years is a title that they bestow upon people who have done super great design work. And I don't know if Frank Lloyd Wright or Zaha Hadid had ever received this, so it doesn't matter to the story. But if you see FAIA after someone's name, a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, then there are two kinds of fellows, and one is design fellow, which would be kind of those kind of architects like the two I just mentioned that are known for doing very, very well received architecture, public type architecture that, in all honesty, cost a lot of money, more than the average architectural client is willing to spend, but really, really wonderful, great architecture. FAIA after an architect's name does not necessarily mean that they're a design fellow. They could also have done a lot of service, donated a lot of their time to the American Institute of Architects, and so you can see FAIA after some architects' names that have been donating a lot of time or money or something to the AIA, that they made a significant contribution. And so, not to take anything away from those people, but to say that if you're looking for a design fellow of the AIA, and the Royal Institute of British Architects has something similar, then that's an indicator. Not always the only people that you can hire to do a fabulous museum or a concert hall that's once in a lifetime for the city or something like that, but those kind of architects. In my understanding, of course, all this is my understanding. My understanding of this is if you go with an architect of that caliber, then the first thing is you have to resign yourself to the fact that you're going to spend whatever it takes. And by that I mean that you're either going to increase the construction budget to cover whatever it is the architect is trying to do, or you'll reduce the scope of your project to spend more per square foot on your project and have a smaller project to accommodate what it is they're trying to do. I actually think it's well worth it. A lot of these kind of architectural design concepts go through my head. We're always thinking of how these great ideas can be applied to the clients and projects that we have. But that's one kind of genre of architecture that you see. An architect that has designed a building that looks like a flag flapping in the breeze, or some kind of landed spacecraft, or in the case of Frank Lloyd Wright, is just stunningly amazing in comparison to the architect of the day back when he was alive. And but people paid a fair dollar more than they initially expected to in a lot of those cases. And so you can go back and listen to stories of Wright and Johnson Wax and what some of his buildings cost. And since he's been gone a long time, people have been freer about explaining those kind of things. It's what we refer to in our practice as an unlimited budget project. So if you decide, hey, I've got an unlimited budget project, I want a public library or something like that, and as the head of the team that the public agency has created to select and go through the construction process, or the church or whoever you're working for that has an unlimited budget, I want to leave behind my legacy of a magnificent building. It's very possible that you could hire that name architect, their firm, and get the third string of that firm assigned to your project and not have such a great project that what you had hoped, the one that's on the front page of the architectural magazines, or that everybody's oohing and eyeing and coveting the idea over, and things like that. So then onward to the remaining 99% of architectural projects in the world. We're talking about commercial projects here. I'll do another video on residential, but at this point I'm going to depart over into the commercial. What I just said applies for residential also. Most people or companies that need architectural design, they have a finite amount of need and a finite amount of budget. And the way they determine that is subject to the other videos that I put out. So you could look at, as an example, the one for office, how to design an office building. And so now you're out looking for an architect. So the first thing is there's some architects out there who just can't do good design. And artistically. Say you had been not particularly talented, managed to get through architecture school, went to work for the public agency that's in charge of sewage treatment, and you've architected a bunch of sewage treatment plant buildings, which are, acceptable quality. Or maybe you're an individual practitioner and you're just not that good at it. And again, they would have a license if they weren't able to design sufficiently, but you're not tested on how good looking your design is. You're tested on public safety issues and compliance with the design program and things like that, because a good looking building is very subjective. So they don't really test architects to see if they can do whatever a good-looking building means, to see if they should have a license or not. They ask them a lot of technical questions and some architectural history questions and things like that. And so it's possible, if you're shopping for the cheapest architect that you can find, that what you're really doing is you're seeking out an architect who's made a practice out of turning out plans as inexpensively as possible, and that doing a quality design or even a good-looking building isn't something that normally enters into the thought process for very long. And so again, if you're in the designing a building for a sewage treatment plant, he or she may be your chosen architect, and with good reason and appropriately. Your building's out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody's going to see it. It's got no windows because of security. There's your architect. Those are the two ends of the spectrum. Zaha Hadid on one end with Frank Lloyd Wright, and on the other end, the architect who does little boxes with no windows. Everybody else is sort of in the middle, and there's some different schools of thought, and the basic schools of thought are that in our firm, now you're seeing pictures of jobs that we've done, presumably instead of my face talking for a long time. You can see that all the architecture looks different, one project different from another. One project is green and purple, which is not my favorite colors because those were the favorite colors of the client, and he made their logo green and purple, and so they just said, you're going to do it green and purple, and so we did. And another one looks like antique Hawaiian building from 50 or 100 years ago, and again, not what I would have thought to do, but that's what the client wanted. And so that's how we go about it. We try to take the client's pulse for what they want, and if they don't really have a feeling about it, we'll steer them in the direction of what we believe to be good, but within their budget. And because nobody wants to be fired for having exceeded the budget, and we can't create money on the client's behalf. So we try to balance between the design style the client's willing to accept and the budget that the client has, and the realities out in the real world, which is everything costs money, and the better it is, the more it costs. So that's why all our projects look different from each other. And I will tell you, I have some that are favorites over others, but almost every single project that you see in our video that just shows all projects, the client was delighted with how it looked when they opened, when they took the project over from the contractor. So that's our interpretation of the way to do it. There's a second school of thought that's sort of an offshoot of that, and that school of thought is architects that are always trying to push you to spend more money. So the theory being that if you have $1 million to spend on a project going in, that's your budget. If I can make you put $200,000 worth of beautiful on the building, then my architectural work is going to look 20% better than everybody else's architectural work, or my competitors, I should say. And so therefore I will get a reputation for doing a great job, and they will not. Well, the flaw in that is that when you're dealing with people who have budgets and you're always pushing out past the budget, eventually you get to the reputation of an architect who can't come up with a design that's reasonable in the opinion of clients in terms of cost. And so that's a problem. Now, moving on from that, and that thought process of adding 20% or 50% or whatever it is to your budget to more beautify the building, we're going to look at that applies to both making all the architecture different to client needs and making all the architecture the same. So now let's talk about making all the architectural design that you do the same. I've lived in Las Vegas a long time. I know my competitors. In a lot of cases, you can just drive me by a new building and say, who did that? And I can tell you who did it, sometimes even the name of the person, if not the firm, because everything that they do, the person or the firm, looks the same. And so this happens a lot when a firm does one kind of work, like just hospitals or just restaurants or just banks or what have you, that they get into this process of thinking that a particular material is ideal for the outside of that, so slate on the outside of a bank or stucco on the outside of a restaurant. And so they start with using the same materials on every single project. And then since their thought process about what's good looking is always the same, all the projects end up looking like each other. And this, in my opinion, is no fun either. And does tend to get you a better looking for the money project on the lack of mistakes level, because if the architect is always trying new things, like trying to make your building facade look like a flag flapping in the breeze, there's going to be technical issues in the development of that are going to cost you more money. And then the second time they do it, they'll have most of the technical issues worked out. And the third time they do it, they'll have hopefully almost all the technical issues worked out. So when you have an architect who's basically doing the same exterior materials and the same design style on every single project, his detailing method, his thought process about how things fit together on the construction contractor or subcontractor level is worked out. And so you're going to have a little bit of savings as a result of that. Might not necessarily be so, because when you're working with common materials, pretty much all the architects that commonly use them know how to detail them. With that said, then you have two types. One which is client driven, which is what SSA architecture is, where everything virtually looks different from everything else. And on the other hand, the strong personality architect that's not Zaha Hadid or Frank Lloyd Wright, where everything looks the same. And so I'll say, using Frank Lloyd Wright as an example, his architectural work was not all the same at all. He went through phases, the different styles that he created that were dramatically different from each other. So again, not to digress into the unlimited class of budgets, but that's what you get in the unlimited class, and it shouldn't matter to you if you're in the unlimited class. That's where you are. I'll just pay it. I don't care. And so I want generations in the future to say that Frank Lloyd Wright and I designed this great building, and leave it for posterity in my name. So after you take a look at those two styles, just thought processes of approaching things, you still have the basic concept of how does the building come together. That I, again, go back to how to design an office building, calculating how many offices you need for mid-level managers and things like that. So when I have all that information back from a client, I can then try to look at trying to come up with a great idea in comparison to all the other ideas nearby it, because even though it's great to be on a national magazine, having designed a museum or what have you in Germany, people will go to that museum because of your being the architect of it. When you're talking about an office building, most people are going to the office building because A, there's somebody in the office building they want to see, or B, if they're moving there, they just generally like it. They don't usually pick an office building because it looks magnificent, although it's definitely a possibility, and some people do that. The problem with the magnificent office building is it costs more. So when we're designing things like tenant improvements within buildings, we have a little bit of a balancing act to do. We don't want to do something that clashes with the exterior of the building, although I will if that's what the client wants. And we don't want to do something that's going to be totally boring. So the compromise is the answer for coming up with an architectural design for most tenant improvements. If you're doing a tenant improvement in a mall and people are going to walk into the tenant improvement on impulse to buy a drink or get a cup of coffee or order a meal, then it better be attractive enough to attract customers. Now, if the food's no good once they get in there, I can't help with that, but you have to at least be attracting customers with the architectural work. And so that and the client's budget and what it's surrounded by in terms of the competition is what drives the design process. So when you're looking at all these things, there's not really a way to do it, and every architect is different in the way that they go about it. And so looking at the architect's website or a portfolio or what have you will tend to give you an indication. But quite frankly, you often don't know where you're going when you enter into the process at the beginning. And so this is why there's an interviewing process for architects on a lot of projects, to sit down and talk to the client about, this is what I'm willing to do, this is what I need to do, and what have you. And then throughout the course of the project, you'll get feedback from the clients. And so we're dialing it in as we go. And some clients will start out with, I just want what I want and I'm willing to pay whatever I have to pay. And then after the job is drawn and the job gets bid, they're grab their throat, fall to the floor because the price is way too high. And so it's hard to know in your own mind as a client what you really mean when you say I'm willing to pay this or that. We do try to point out to clients as we're in the design process and they're making choices, what the caliber, what the order of magnitude of choices are. So we had a client a number of years ago that was very excited about doing a new restaurant, and it was in the mall, and you could see a very nice bar layout from the mall to be attractive to customers. And that client picked a stone material they wanted to make the bar top out of, and beautiful stuff. And so when we were shown that and told, hey, we want to use this, I said, it really looks great to me and I want to use it. Just so you know, a normal slab of granite for a use like this that's kind of mundane, this is probably about $600. This one's $25,000. And so as long as you're aware, we're not doing cost estimating as we go through the process, but that's what you're spending. And then they decided to spend the $25,000, so I was quite pleased. So that's a little bit about the design process for people to understand that aren't educated as architects. There's a lot more to it, of course, but try to maintain a 15 to 25 minute video length, and we're right out on the edge of 25 right now. So I'll let it go for there. My name is Ken Small, and I'm an architect in Las Vegas, Nevada with SSA Architecture. We're at 7040 Laredo Street, Suite C, 702-873-1718. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe on these videos.